I don't know whether all of you are familiar with Lucee or heard about it. Can I just get I know that John, you're familiar with it, and Rick, you're familiar, but what about the others? Would you want me to just tell you a little bit about it before I go into the Lucee 6 version?
I don't think it hurts because you don't know who's going to be watching the video, and usually we
that
get 10 times as many people or 20 times as many people watching the video.
Okay, good. So then what I'll do is I'll just show you a little bit about Lucee. So Lucee, okay, let me just do it differently then. I'll just tell you a little bit about the history. I myself started in 2000, so in terms of the good old guys, the good old dev guys, I'm a latecomer. Started in August 2000 with Cold Fusion 4.5, and my coworker Michael Offner and we actually used it a lot, and we noticed that we didn't like the performance, the price, the memory hog, it being a real memory hog. And so we thought, okay, why not just give it a go? And Misha, who's the core developer, he studied information technology, and there was a thesis that he was supposed to write about a compiler. So he said, okay, let me write a compiler, and yes, from PHP to CFML, or from CFML to PHP, because PHP was used on every web server back in the days, so we thought it might make sense. But PHP back then was not that stable, so we thought, okay, let's switch to Java. And then since then, we're creating bytecode. Well, version 1.1 of Rilo back then was writing bytecode directly. That was even before Adobe started doing that. And that's still the same way today. So we are taking CFML code and convert it directly into Java bytecode. And that Java bytecode is then executed against the Lucee runtime, which is a set of libraries which are that are interpreting or compiling or executing the code that you have in CFML, and then is compiled to bytecode. Lucee is very compatible to Adobe Cold Fusion. We always try to close the gap whenever they come up with a new version of Cold Fusion, like Cold Fusion 2023. So Lucee 6 should be mostly compatible. Obviously, we have certain things that are proprietary and very complicated maybe to implement, like CF Report, for example, which is a proprietary solution, or RDS support, which we cannot mimic because it's protected by patents. We cannot do that. But there are other ways how you can write reports in Lucee by using Crystal reports, or there is even an extension for this in Lucee. And Lucee, from the beginning, was designed to be so you could host multiple sites on it, and the context, this is how we call them, web contexts, they were separated by default. So a data source that you define on one web context was not visible on the other web context. So Lucee always had this idea of web and server administrator. Let me just share my screen to show you how it looks like now. And okay, so the Lucee administrator, if I log out, let me just see, this is how I log out. The Lucee administrator actually is consisting of two parts. It's a server administrator and a web administrator. The web administrator is for your different websites that you're hosting in different directories. And the server administrator is just like the Cold Fusion administrator, something for all of your, for that server, which Lucee was installed. And in Cold Fusion, in the enterprise version, what you can do is you can create security contexts where you're actually securing all the individual data sources, custom tags, and whatever. And Lucee has that built in by default. So that's why we have two types of administrators. So if I'm logging in, wait. Here we go. So we have the web administrator, and I suppose I have to log in again. Sorry. and the server administrator. And in the server administrator, you have almost all the settings that you have in the web administrator, and they are setting the defaults for all the webs. So if you overwrite it in your web admin, then it is actually valid for your local administrator. And if you define, for example, a data source in the server administrator, it's available everywhere, right? So in all the web contexts that you're defining. A web context can be just like a host definition in your server, in your Nginx server, web server, or on ISS. So all the websites that you define there can be powered by one Lucee engine, but they all have their own web administrator, right? That was something that we had since Rilo 1.0. Okay, any questions so far? Because I know this can be sometimes very, well, I don't know, confusing. Okay, good. And in 2003, we actually started Rilo back then, and we first went public with Rilo in 2005. And since 2005, we were closed source for about 3 years, and then in 2008 we open sourced Rilo back then, and then later on Lucee. Went actually pretty good. Of course, we thought we'd be making millions, but obviously life, first you have plans and then the plans come. That was 2008. We went open source. Then we had a bad investment that we made, and then we had to fork Rilo and create Lucee out of that. So it was our own fault. We trusted the wrong people. Doesn't matter. That's something that you have that you take as a lesson learned. And since 2014, Lucee exists, so 9 years already, late 2014. And since 9 years, the company that I work for, Regia, is Regia is actually just part-time. I'm fully working at DistroKid, so I'm just helping out some things in Regia, but I'm fully working at DistroKid. But the company that I used to work for 100% in the past is developing Lucee. So almost everything that you see there is developed by our core team. And Zach, for example, is a community manager. He helps a lot. We have a couple of people in India and also in Switzerland that are helping with the development. And Lucee is open source LGPL version 2, which means you can use it for almost anything you like. The only thing that you have to do, if I remember correctly, if you contribute code to it, it will also automatically be LGPL version 2. It's not GPL, so the source code, the applications that you run on top of it do not have to be open source as well, so you can make money with it, whatever. So we don't make any money on that, right? Okay, now you for sure think, how do you make money then? Well, we are good singers. No, actually we're not. Even though I'm working in the music industry in the meantime, we of course offered a lot of consulting, and we made quite okay with that over the last 20 years. And yes, for the last 4 years now, or 5 years, actually I had my work anniversaries on the 1st of October. I'm helping out at DistroKid. DistroKid, a very big, I think the largest music distribution company in the world. We're responsible for about 40% of all the music on the planet. And that's a full Lucee shop. So everything that they run is running on Lucee. And that's great. We have, now you maybe want to know, how do we finance the development of Lucee? Well, until 2015, we paid that all ourselves. So I can tell you that I really invested with my partners a lot into Rilo. And it has given me back a lot, because every now and then people come up to our booth when we are at a conference and they say, hey, you saved my job. And just because of you, I'm still able to use CFML. And that gives me back a lot, right? So that makes me very happy, because that means that you actually leave a legacy for later on, right? And that all the work that you've done in the past 20 years wasn't in vain. With Adobe, we had, at the beginning, it was a good relationship, then it went a little sour, and now it's good again for the last 10 years. So I'm actually having a relatively good connection with them, and I hope to expand that in the future, that maybe we can work a little bit more together to get the language to match the same core. You know, you have heard that before. In the 2008 or 9, we had a language advisory committee, but that didn't go anywhere for whatever reason. And now let's see whether we can pick it up again and define some of the standards. Would be nice, because then people like the folks from Ortus can write software which is easier to maintain because it works on both engines, no matter what. Okay, now, why should you use Lucee? Well, the easiest thing is obviously the price. Lucee is free, open source and free. And if you're not happy, we'll refund you. But anyway, Lucee is supposed to be very fast. In the meantime, Adobe has done a great job to catch up and to be fast as well. I haven't done any tests anymore, because in the meantime, I think they were both so fast that it's not worth going into the details and doing all the tests again that I've done in the beginning. In the beginning, it was really important and good to do those tests, just also to force their hand to do something about their engine. And I think we succeeded quite okay. Yes, and now we had Rilo 4.5, that was the last, or 4.1, that was the last version of Rilo. Then Lucee came out with Lucee 4.5, which was active for about, there were lots of small releases with some features, some bug fixes, many bug fixes. And we have then released Lucee 5, I think in 2018. And Lucee 5 was, until, I would say, this week, the latest version of Lucee. And I think on Friday, they will launch the final release for Lucee 6. So as of Friday, you will be able to, well, enjoy final releases, finally, of Lucee 6. Took a long time, yes. You know, I could, of course, open a parent and just say, okay, insert excuse in here. There were many reasons why it was delayed, but nonetheless, getting back to how do we finance it? Lucee is owned, the Lucee source code is owned by the Lucee Association. The Lucee Association is it's an association of members, and these members are paying a monthly fee. The monthly fee is helping us a lot, it's $600. And we have currently, I think, 18 members, and these 18 members are funding everything that is around Lucee. So it is a non-for-profit organization, and since we don't have some kind of legal status of a non-for-profit organization, because it is a Swiss organization, we don't get things like perks like Google Suite for free or something like that, or Slack for free. So I don't know whether we can do that. I mean, it's still costing us some money, but everything that the association earns is going into the development of Lucee, and sometimes we're sponsoring events like CF Camp or other events, or maybe create some t-shirts or things like that. If you want to contribute, just go to Open Collective, opencollective.org. I guess that's the right thing. Let me just pull that quickly up. Open Collective, yes, here. I'm sharing my screen again, just that you see what I'm talking about. So this is Open Collective Lucee. Here you can see who's contributing. You can be an annual LAS member. There you see all the different companies. So there are 5 and 7, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we have 16 members currently. And they pay $600 a month, and the other one is paying. The other ones are paying the same amount but yearly. right? So if you want to contribute, we're happy about every contribution. Just go to opencollective.com/Lucee, and there you can help out if you want to. We would appreciate that, obviously, a lot. You can rest assured that every penny that goes in there is accounted for, and we only use it to promote and extend Lucee. Okay, any questions so far?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Good. And what I'm here to present about is Lucee 6. That's the latest version. We just launched a release candidate today. So if you go to download.lucee.org, you will see that there is a 600572 snapshot that came out today. We will release this release candidate, I suppose, and then there will be a 601 pretty soon, which will contain the whole compatibility to Adobe CodeFusion 2023. Shouldn't take us too long. As you may have seen, that we have a new Lucee logo here. And for the enthusiasts of you, every release of Rilo and Lucee has been named after a dog. Because if you want to work at Rilo back in the days, you had to own a dog, more or less, because everyone who was working for Rilo back in the days owned a dog. And let me just do a quick switch here to have a different presenter sharing. So share this one. Okay, I think this is good. Okay. Okay, good. So what is this all about? First of all, the source code, as you see, is from CFCamp. That's when we first presented this. And you can download the code here and look at it, play around with it. It has the prerequisite of Lucee 6.something installed, and I suppose Java 11 plus, right? That is what is important there. Okay, good. So one of the biggest things that we wanted to introduce in Lucee 6 is Java Islands, Java Code Islands. Lucee is based on Java, but still, since the code is compiled into Java bytecode, there is, of course, extra code that is generated into the bytecode to, well, mimic whatever the CFML code was supposed to do. But pure Java code is always faster. So if we introduce Java Code Islands, the Java Code Islands allow you to write Java code and execute that in the native speed that Java has. And an example, for example, great, is this. Hang on, no, it's, let me just go to the code here. Let me just pull that away. And see here, Java Code Islands. Code Islands, okay, well, what they do is actually they show us all different kinds of ways how we can use Java. But for example, here, in this particular case, you can have a function which is of type Java, but you write that in CF script, right? So this is a Java Code Island because you can now write type equals Java, right? I know it's weird. I don't know if some of you guys are using Java at all, whether you have knowledge there, but if you're looking for a high performance, then just make sure that you use Java when you can. Obviously, not everyone is familiar with Java. Lucee, it's very fast by default as well, but still it's possible to just create a thing like this, okay? A construct like this. So as said here, int function type equals Java, and then we can have it in a component as well. So methods inside of a CFC can also be of type Java, and then you return a certain integer here. Then you can also use Lambda functions in Java. That's the interface of the Java Lambda interface. By the way, if I'm going too fast, or if you have any questions, again, let me know. And also what is nice as well, if you have Java code, you can create CFML code islands inside Java, right? Let me just see. No, this example is actually not in here, but it is possible. So you can write a Java code, and in there you can just start with CFML and slash CFML, I guess that's what it is. And then you can write regular CF code. Okay, what you can also do is you can extend a Java class and implement a certain interface, which means you need to implement all the methods that that interface is using. And you can do that in CFML. You just need to return the proper type, and then you can extend that method. Good. And yes, this is the way how you can actually implement it and use it in the code. And this is a, oh, hang on, I'm going too fast. So you create a hash util, and the hash util is written in Java, right? So it's a Java object. And then you can just pass the CFC to the hash util as something that is usable then in Java, and then you can just dump it. So this is all CFML code. Yeah, so what you can also do, and this is very nice, if you're implementing an interface, you can use onMissing method to just mimic any method that you haven't implemented. So the interface expects 10 methods, you just need 2, but you want to make sure that the other ones don't throw any errors. Just use onMissing method and then just implement it there. Okay, well, we have seen that before. Okay, now what you can do in addition.
So I did have one question about that.
Sure, absolutely.
Quite a few of the Java methods or components or classes, I should say, that I use tend to overload the methods. So yes. They have, and CF doesn't really play with that too well. Mm-hmm. Or you're returning, think of like a factory and you're returning another class or something like that. How do you deal with those in that case?
Well, you mean overloading in your Java classes? Well, what you could do is you could extend your class and overload that if you want to. But I mean, I might not get your problem properly.
So one of the classes will, like, I need to extend or something like that, or implement mm-hmm. the class has yes. 3 methods. They all have the same function name. They all return mm-hmm. different things.
Okay. And depending on the type that you're using, one of the 3 is used, right? That's the usual way how that works. Well, it should work the same way. So what you could do is you just define the return type in CFML, which then overloads the same functionality, because remember, this is compiled down to bytecode. So in there, it will work exactly as Java is supposed to work, right? So you're overloading the same function name by just using a different return type, because you can define the return type in CFML as well, right? So you just define the same. Yep, go ahead.
And you can define the return type as another Java class, for example.
Which I'm not sure about. So
okay.
what we can do is write me your question by email, and then okay. I'll look that up later. Okay.
Good enough. Yeah, I messaged in the Slack channel, and everybody was very confused with what I was trying to say. So,
well,
in this case, I was trying to do some crypto stuff or some SSL libraries and that type of stuff, and it was getting complicated quick. So,
mm-hmm.
Thank you.
For what? I didn't really answer it. But yes, just write me that as an email, and then I'll try to figure it out, because obviously there is a saying in German it says something like, if you don't know how it goes, you need to know where it's written, right? So where to look it up. So I don't know exactly how it goes, but I know exactly where to look it up. So if you send me that email, I'll get back to you with the details.
Thank you.
Okay, good. then we have had that, yes. So one thing that we're also introducing is that you can have subcomponents in a component, because very often you just need a helper component, and that helper component is then part of, well, you have to write a file for that, and you have to create a CFC, you have to instantiate that. And subcomponents have a specific operator that they're using. And so you see in this case, you're saying, okay, from the main, I'm actually using main test inside, and the main test, hang on, it's defined like this. Here's component name equals sub, and that name sub is then defined here in echo sub with the hang on, where is it? I'm sorry, my mouse is going crazy. You see the $sign in here, that is actually instantiating the subcomponent. So using the $sign is allowing you to address the subcomponent of my CFC, right? Let me know if this doesn't make sense. This instantiates the main CFC, so this one, and inside that you have a component named sub, and by using $sign sub, you're instantiating the subcomponent. This allows you to create a selection of several components to not have to deal with so many files. This has very big implications with the loading time. Very often, component loading time is really very expensive, and having these components being part of the main component, not only you group them together so that it makes sense, but it's always already also loaded a lot faster. Okay. Good. And also you can create an inline component in your regular CFC code, right? So in your code, the new component now returns the object, and you can now use that object, that component immediately after you just created it. This again takes away the necessity of creating a component as a file. You know, you might now say, hey, this is actually crazy, because you usually want to group all your components together or create a library, make it reusable or whatever. But very often you need a method that you define for a certain type, like a component. So you have usually arrays and structs don't have additional components. But for example, if you want to create a bean is very lightweight, and you can just create a simple component. We actually thought for Lucee 6 to introduce beans, which are very lightweight components, so that they're a lot faster than regular components, because regular components have so many more things that they need to be aware of, like, for example, inheritance, or overwriting methods, interfaces, and method injection, superclasses, and all those things. And a bean could just be a collection of values with a couple of methods that are applied to that. But it didn't make it in this release, but we're still thinking about that, right? Just as an open parent. Now, one thing that we usually do at Lucee is what we do is we are focusing mostly on the engine itself. Yesterday when I talked to Adobe, I told them my biggest criticism with Adobe is that they do a lot of shiny features, which are very good and nice, but they're very often neglecting the core engine. And the core engine, in my opinion, is very important, because that's what everyone is working with. And as you see from, and you know, this is my criticism on Adobe, but they're apparently quite successful with what they're doing, so that's absolutely fine. We're just taking a different route, and that, of course, leads to certain things that are a little, well, off the path that Adobe is treading on. But still, what this tells you is that Lucee is a language from developers to developers, for developers, right? And one of the things that we always wanted to introduce are listeners, right? So query was the first tag in CFML because it was called DBML at the beginning. And we introduced query listeners. So query listeners are events that are triggered before, after, and in case of an error. So you, for example, create a method called before, or in this case, it's actually a closure that we're using here. And the before gets the caller scope where you are. And as arguments, you get, for example, the data source, you get the SQL statement, you get everything. So just to give you an example where you can use this. We have a database analytics team, and the database analytics teams every now and then goes over the MySQL execution log and sees which are the queries that are very slow. And very often the reference to the original query is missing. What you have to then do is you take the SQL statement and try to look for it in the source code. So, but mostly when you use query param or something else, the query is actually not looking as it is actually in the source code, because the source code contains colon something or CF query param or whatever, and you don't find it. So what you can do in this case is you can actually take the arguments.sql or whatever it's called, I'm not sure. You can take that one and add a comment at the end where it just says, okay, I come from this line in that CFM file. And for every query that is then sent to the server, they can always see where that query comes from. This is very, very helpful because then they know exactly who to address and to tell them, hey, please, you need to change this to whatever. Okay, and then after, the after function gives you the results. So again, the caller, the arguments, the results, and the metadata, like how fast was it, when was it cached or not, etc., etc. So everything that you see, for example, in a query dump. And of course, you might say, okay, you want to tamper with the results? Well, yes, you can do that, because sometimes you want to just make a query just as you need it in your code. And it is much easier to do that in a listener than just extending your code by certain things, because let's say, for example, you always want to have a specific column in there which has, I don't know, something in that column. And so it gives you this power to do that. Right? Any questions to that? Because I personally think that this is a very great addition. I've used that quite a lot.
Is it possible to do this with just a particular query as opposed to all of them?
Yeah, this is the definition that you have this.query.listener equals. This means if you define that in the application CFC, all the queries will will get that. What you can also do is you can define it by data source. And what you can also do, you can define it for each query individually. So for example, what you can say is CF query name equals data source equals listener equals component name. Right, and then you can just deal with that in any single query that you want.
Okay. And then looks like Randy's got a question. Does this also work with Microsoft SQL?
It works with anything. Doesn't matter. This is working with query and not dependent on any type of database. Doesn't really matter. You know, query is abstracting the way how you are getting data from the data source. So everything that we do is on the Lucee side. And that means everything that this here shows is completely independent of whatever type of data source or database you have. Okay. Any more questions? Does the query param variable work with? Yeah, of course it works. Yes, query param definitely works with MySQL, MS SQL. Works with all of them.
So I guess to ask the same question I did just a minute ago. So if I do like a tag CF query or whatever,
let's just
equals...
do that. Let's hang on. Let's just do that. Query listener. Okay, so let's see if that's here. Okay, so look, here you have the example. Let me just make that a little bigger. Okay. Yeah, there you go. All good? Can everyone read that?
Yep.
Okay, so you see here, we have an inline component, listener, and then custom listener, we can do query data source listener equals, right? This is how it works. Okay, well, let's see whether we can execute that. I don't know whether I have the data source that we're using. Let's use, what else? I have something, MySQL, maybe that's working. Data source MySQL, do I have that defined? I don't know. But anyway, you can get the gist of it, right? So it just gives you all the arguments. What I could do maybe is, let's just, I can do it. Let's try whether query of query works. Okay, so let's see if directory action equals, oh my God, I haven't programmed in tag for a long while. List directory equals /test name equals Lucee. And then what else? I hope that works with the query of query. I have no idea. I'm the biggest enemy of query. I don't like query of query at all, but there are people that like it. But in this case, it's just a demo, so let's see. What else is missing? Directory was that. True. Okay. Let's see whether that works. /test/ okay, so this works good, and it's called 04. Okay. Okay, communication. Okay, this is okay. Now I need to change this. Please help me out. What is it called? DB type equals query or something?
That should be correct, yeah.
Query, and then select store from Lucee.
It should be from, yeah.
Yeah, and star. Okay, let's see whether this works. I have no idea. F5. Oh, no, wait. There we go. Well, it does something. I need to maybe, did I dump that? Oh, there you go. Well, maybe the thing is empty. Let's see, CF directory. No, CF dump. Dump eval equals Lucee abort save refresh. So did I just do that wrong? Where are we? Let's say /test/ maybe. Still nothing good. Then just say /. No, maybe not /. It needs to be actually /test.
Just do a dot. That'll be the current directory.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Oh, why is this taking so long? It is recurse. Okay, recurse might take a while. ./test needs to be, because maybe this is executing it. Whatever. But you get the gist of it. Let me just maybe then do a query new. CF set Lucee equals query new. And then we just say, come on, last name. And then we do this name. Okay, this should do it. Oh, I like that. CF dump just to see if I did that properly. Okay, query now. What is that? Function second argument. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, maybe they need to do with this. String. Okay, this way. Okay, there we go. Right, so you might see here that by defining a struct with the column names as the keys, you can just add records. And if you have an array, do that like this. I can just take the same thing. It should give me 2 records. So this is the way how you can do that with query new. That's kind of handy sometimes.
Did that answer your question, John, about returning an array of records?
Hang on. What was the question? Let me just see. Query to return an array of records.
Return an array of records.
Yeah. John, is that answering your question? This just gives me that, but it doesn't give me the listener. So maybe listeners don't work on query of query. I don't know.
Normally the query is returning a row. Each column is an array of all the fields. So what I'm after is when I convert to JSON, I like to, I know that
you can do like that.
Yes.
Let's see. There you go. Is this the thing that you wanted?
That is what I like.
Okay.
That way, because I love view programming, so when I do this, I can just flip it right over without extra manipulation.
Yeah. So what you can also do is, let's just give that a numeric while I'm here. I'll just put an ID in here, and I'll just do ID 1, and here I'll just put an ID 2, and now you can just say struct e column equals ID. Okay. So, and this now gives you a struct which contains the first ID, the ID as the key, and a struct with the individual elements as the record. I use that very often for lookups. So I go to the table that I want to use for a lookup. So we are using very, very huge tables at DistrictKit. And in order to make a join faster, I don't join. I just get from the main table, and then all the lookups that I have in that main table, I get the records from the other big table that I was supposed to join with. Like for example, imagine I'm giving you all the plays that your song ever has had. Now you maybe have, you might have, let's say, released 10 songs. Now these 10 songs, or let's say 50 songs. These 50 songs are in a table of 40 million. So if I join, let's say, all the releases that we have for all the users that we have, there might be billions, which I join with a table of 40 million. Sure, the database is actually quite capable of doing that, but it's a lot faster if you just get, let's say, those 5,000 rows from that several billion table and not join with a songs table. You just read all the songs table into a struct with a return type equals struct, and then you can just fill in the blanks by looping over those 5,000 that you have and just do a query of 1 or 2 in this case. Right? So that gave us a huge performance benefit by not using joins, but just using bare data and filling it up with whatever we need. Does that make sense? Okay.
Looks really good.
Okay, good. So query listeners. As you have seen, you can create a component with before and after and error. And error, or actually you haven't seen because I have no database that I can use that I can show you. So we have before, after, and error. And they are actually reacting on events. So before the query gets executed, after the query gets executed, and in case of an error. So for example, if a query throws an error, you could still make that return no error, because for whatever reason you don't want it to throw an error. Maybe you want to hide the fact that there was an error with that. And it is the return type, if the return value. If the function error returns true, then the error is thrown. If it I need to look up the documentation, but one of the two, you can return true or false. One throws the error, the other one does not. Okay, now another thing that we're allowing here is asynchronous queries, right? So asynchronous queries are sent to the database and you don't care about the result. Right? We use that very often when we have loads of updates that we send to the database and we don't want the main thread to be bothered with that, like writing to a log file or whatever. So it just spins off a thread, runs that, and there obviously the listeners make a lot of sense. So for example, if an update that I'm writing to in an asynchronous way is failing, then the listener still listens to the error that happens and can just react on that. Right. Okay, good. So you see in this case, you have an async equals true, and then a listener that just says, okay, here's the exception that has happened with that. This is something that I requested. Now, what do you do if you want to stream or you want to, how do you solve it? And this is a question that, let me just go back to here. This is a question that I would like to ask the 5 of you. What do you do if you have, let's say, a query that is supposed to return, I don't know, let's say 5 million records, which you are supposed to write into a table or in a file, like a CSV export? Anyone have any idea?
I usually spin that up as a separate thread and let it do its thing.
Well, yes, but what if you run out of memory? You know, if you do select, I don't know, you're selecting 50 columns, and maybe it's not 5 million, maybe it's 50 million, and you just want to stream that to a CSV. Maybe you're jumping to a different solution then, or a different type of thing, right? So anyone? I mean, Randy, you might have been in my talk in Munich, so you might know it. But anyway, so if anyone has an idea, your mics are all accessible, so you can just unmute and say it. Okay, well, if you don't know, then I'll try to help you with that. One of that is Query Lazy. Now, Query Lazy, what does Query Lazy do? Query Lazy is working exactly like the query tag, but it does not give you all the records at once. It actually just opens up a pointer to the query, and the query is then streamed in the block factor numbers. So you get, for example, 1,000 records each time they are streamed from the server. Like, for example, another example, if you have something that is returning records very slow, you can actually stream them instead of waiting until all of the records have been generated, right? Or have been queried. Like, for example, if you say, okay, order by something, and that something happens way later in the query. So if you have, let's say, 5 million records, and only the last couple of, let's say, 10,000s have that value that you want to sort by descending or ascending or whatever, then what you can do is, or if they are spread over these 5 million and they only come every 10,000 records, then you can also just stream the query to the client, and then you can use a listener, and this listener then gets 1,000 records. You can do something with those 1,000 records, and then you can continue and go to the next 1,000, to the next 1,000. So you can actually stream a query to a file, right? I use that very often because I'm dealing a lot with large files and large exports, and this is actually something that I wanted to have because I've seen that all these clients, these database clients, are capable of doing that, right? So they have to have some functionality, and the functionality are these query pointers. So where you're not streaming we're not loading everything into memory. Also, this is helping you a lot with memory consumption. If you want to use memory, if you want to load a huge query into memory, obviously that can lead to issues. And also, the query.record count is available as soon as the pointer is there, because the server first does an estimated guess, or a very good estimated guess, and gives you the record count to expect, and then it streams them to the client. So that's why even a query lazy might take a little while until it runs. I think we do it this way because we're actually jumping at the last record, then reading how many records are there in total, and then going to the first one again, and then stream it. This is the way how you can do it. And it has been very, very helpful. If you have any questions, just ask.
There is 2 questions out there, one from John and one from Randy.
Okay, John. If it streams record, do all the SQL DBs offer this functionality? SQL Server does, MySQL does, Redshift does, I haven't tested, Postgres does. The issue with Postgres was, what was the issue? It's solved in the meantime. The issue with Postgres was that I think for every block, it opened up a new thread at some point in time, and we had to add a specific configuration so that it doesn't. No, actually, that's wrong, because that was with the keep data source alive. There is a checkbox in the Lucee data sources that you can check before the query is executed that the data source is still valid, and that was the issue that was there with Postgres. But as far as I know, I haven't come across any of them that do not support this. So give it a try. If it doesn't work, just shoot us a message. Yes, exactly. So Randy, it really does eat the elephant one bite at a time, so it dies a painful death. Yes. And that is exactly the reason, because I was running out of memory because I had to export hundreds of thousands and millions of records, and I couldn't load them. So I thought, okay, we need to, yeah, of course you can do in steps, you can do limit by and then offset row and whatever, but that is just, you have to do a lot of coding there. This is very beautiful and very easy to use, and it helps a lot. Okay, good. So let's see. Query indexes. This is also something that we came up with. Now, indexes are just like indexes as you see them in the database. And they allow you to address a query in a very, very fast way, right? If you, for example, create an index as it is here, where you say index name equals ID, then you can just say get query row by index, and then you say I want number 2, wherever that is in the query, and you don't have to search for that value in your code. And it is actually working just like indexes in the local in databases. It is not yet implemented for the query of queries. So for example, if you say give me all where ID equals so and so, but it is the first step in that direction. Right. So if you have a regular query that you're querying, and you need more or less 2 things that you need to sort by, then of course you can sort the query. You can do something like query.sort, and then you say what it's supposed to be sorted at. But this here builds up an index in the background, and then allows you to address the line by the index value. Very helpful when you're having to traverse very fast through the query.
Gert, did you have a slide on that? John was asking.
You mean this one?
Yeah, what we're talking about.
You stopped sharing your screen.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Obviously, I should share again. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was me. So this is the slide that I was talking about, right? So you're defining a query, data source, and then index name. And then you can just say, okay, this is the ID. And I think it's also possible to define 2 by using comma, and then you have 2 indexes, and then Lucee builds up an index in the background, and then you can just use it as is. We have query row by index and query row data by index, which gives you the whole record, right? Okay, questions about this. Might look a little strange at the beginning, but it has proven very helpful to me as well, especially when dealing with large queries. And I don't want to use query of query because query of query is really not that fast. And it might really cost you a lot of headache. So I was here presenting on that slide, and I was thinking, okay, well, nobody asked the question, and thank you, John, for reminding me. Okay, so we did a little bit of work on mail as well. Look at that, mail listeners also available for mail, where you can just do before, where you can, well, even tamper with the mail if you want to, but this is, of course, code that you have written. So very often you want to see that the mails that are going out are going to a specific email address. So let's assume this is how we used it, for example. We wanted to test with real data whether emails are going to the right users. And we wanted to do that in dev, and the emails were going out. But of course, we didn't want to send them test emails. So what we did is we created a before listener, which took the email and replaced the address with a local address and placed the address that it was supposed to be sent to in the body. So at the top of each email, this email would have gone out to X, right? And that happens with any mail that goes out. So we have a collective email, which then catches all the emails that we're sending out. Obviously, you can do that with a local mail listener or the fake mail and others, but this is, of course, tying into a larger thing like using Datadog, which then looks at all these things, and depending on, of course, on your tool of choice that you use. And the after function is making sure that the email is sent, and maybe you want to have a confirmation or something like that. Okay, let me just put this on a different screen so that I can always see if somebody has a question. Yeah, okay. Good, so mail async is the same thing. You remember that in Code Fusion and Lucee, they have the mail spooler. The mail spooler is taken on an email and just sends it without, well, it doesn't inform you if the mail actually failed. It informs you in the log, and the async attribute does that even if the spool enable is not set, right? Okay, good. I so love this. I so love this. This is something that I was asking about for years, and now you might say, well, why does one want to do this? We have changed in Lucee 6, we have changed the way how timeouts work. By default, Lucee does not have any timeout anymore. It doesn't, so no request timeout. You can set it, but it is actually ignored. Only why? So it will only be affecting the whole thing if there are too many requests running at the same time. Then it just says, okay, I'm sorry. And you can set that. You can actually set that. And you can even set the fact that you want to actually enable request timeout again. Why did we do this? We did do this because it led to a lot of locked up systems in the background, and we have had very many requests from clients which said, okay, suddenly some backend system is still waiting for Lucee to collect the results because it just came very late or it didn't come at all. And Lucee just killed the thread, right? Just killed the connection to that outer system. And so that's why we refrained from having a request timeout. And it only catches, or it only is active if you have a certain threshold of requests running at the same time, still trying to, and they are over the request timeout limit that you can still define. So you can define a request timeout limit of 50 seconds, and the code will still execute even after 50 seconds if nothing else is on the system. But if you, for example, have 20 requests running and they're all past the request timeout, then they will immediately fail, all of them, right? Now, if you don't have a request timeout anymore, one thing that you might want to have is a timeout tag. The timeout tag defines a timeout after which the code that is inside the CF timeout will actually bail out, and it will break that. Because, for example, you are expecting a certain thing to react after a certain amount of time. And before, you had no chance of dealing with that. You had to wait for the request timeout, and then in the application CFC, perhaps do something where you react on the request timeout or whatever. And even if the request on request timeout or in the application CFC had a code that took ages, then the request never finished. So with a CF timeout, you can now actually force the code to be done in a certain amount of time, and then it throws an error, and you can catch that error and do something with it. Yes. The point is that the inline, so the code that you have here, sorry, excuse me, just a second. So the idea is that whatever is it in between opening and closing CF timeout is supposed to be ending in 100 seconds in this case, right? So, or 100 milliseconds, right? And if it doesn't, it throws an error. Okay, makes sense? Good. I will use that. Yeah, go ahead.
So again, did they remove the request timeout properties in the administrator and all that then to reflect that?
No, they're still there. But the most important thing is that you need to know that it only is affecting. Actually, I didn't even check. Let me not lie to you and check whether that's the case. Where is it? Under request, I suppose. Request timeout. Oh, it's still here. So it's still here. So you can still define it, but as far as I remember, and maybe I hope that I didn't tell you anything wrong, as far as I remember, the code does not stop after 50 seconds, unless there are lots of requests going on. Now you might say, okay, well, this can lead to infinity loops and whatever. Well, the thing is this: it will stop eventually if there are other things falling into this in these infinite loops. But that also means that you have an issue in your code, right? So while you can, of course, the thing that we did is we wanted to make sure that the server does not break, right? What you can do, there is a way how you can stop running requests in Lucee with Lucee itself. So I built a certain thing that shows me which requests are running, and then I can just press a button and then cancels a certain request, right? Let me get back to you on that, whether request timeout still exists or not. Actually, you know something? Let's try it. Let's just give it a try.
Let's say what it almost sounds like is you're just stopping the buffering to the web server or to the console.
Yeah.
At that point. Okay.
Okay, so let's just say Control M, script, and then we'll just do a loop from =1 to =100 index, or we'll do a loop times =100. I guess you didn't know that you have loop times. Sleep 1000, and then we'll just do a flush with an echo of quote. Okay, let me just put that up here, and then let's see what happens. This should actually let's call this sleep.cfm. Okay, and let's refresh this. Is there sleep somewhere? Then let's just try it out. Sleep.cfm. Is it flushing? What is it doing? Yeah, it should be somewhere. Is there a dot or something? I don't see a dot. No, there is no dot. But it's sleeping. It should be flushing. Did I do something wrong? Sleep, echo, flush. No, fine. Doesn't give me anything, but let's see what it is. I know that Nginx will actually give up after a minute, and the code might still run. Let me just see. I'm going to pull up the surveillance. I do have that here. I don't have it here. I have it on a different system, but let's see what happens after sleep. Oh, there you go. So proved me wrong, you see? Okay, so apparently it still works, but I don't, maybe it is just working when you're within Lucee code. Because if I do something like, let's say HTTP calls or something like that, where we are using Java functions in the background, Java methods, let me get back to you on this, because, you know, I was 100% sure about this because I was in that discussion where we actually decided to not do that anymore. But I suppose it is actually when you have resources open that are using outside resources. But still, this code is very useful when you know that your code that you have within the CF timeout is expected to finish in a certain amount of time. Okay. Well, yeah, another detailed example. I will send you, or you have the presentation, but I can send you the presentation as well. Now, the Lucee admin has changed a little. You have now 3 choices. You have the old Lucee web and server, so you have Lucee web and server, and you have the Lucee single mode. So what you can do is you can actually run your complete application with just like Cold Fusion is, where you have one server. If you have one web application or one URL that you're just using your Lucee application for, then you can get rid of all the server environment and the web environment. Then you have just one Lucee administrator, you know, the green one here. And that makes everything a little bit faster because we now are running in single mode, and the single mode is just neglecting certain things like, okay, do I need to check, is there a server setting? Is there a web setting? It is just one setting. Right. So this is a new experiment. So you can switch in the administrator to it. So if you go to server, it's in the overview. Or where is that? Here you go. Just switch to single mode. You want to activate Lucee in single mode. This means you only have a single administrator, one place where you do all your configurations for all your web context webs. Switch to single mode, and don't forget all settings in all are done in all web contexts. Yes. So that means you will all of the settings that you have in all your local web administrators will all be merged into the single context mode. Does that make sense? I hope it does.
So is that setting something that can be defined in a variable or
yes,
or like an environment variable or
almost
something like that?
Yes, absolutely. Almost everything that you see in the Lucee administrator can be defined as an environment variable or as a startup argument, or in the application CFC even. I think context mode might not be possible. You know, the context mode is very good for Docker containers, because usually you power up a Docker container just for one single application. Yes, John, you're exactly right up there. Okay, so we are using the single context for our distro-kit Docker containers because that makes the code even a little faster and lighter. Okay, good. Let's go back to the presentation. So as you see here, you can switch back and forth. So, but once you have merged all your settings into the new context, you obviously will lose the separation again when you switch back, right? Because, you know, it has no idea where this individual data sources belong to, right? And it's always a little critical if you have the same data source defined in 2 different web contexts, which you want to merge into the single mode, then one would overwrite the other one. Right? So a little tricky. But if you're defining it from scratch, like for a Docker container, this is perfect. You know, and the overhead for Lucee is way less, which means it powers up faster, it runs faster, and it uses less RAM. Then one thing that we wanted to do for ages, the Lucee configuration was always done in XML. And we have switched that from XML to JSON. So everything that you see in the administrator is stored in a JSON in the format of cfconfig, right? So the cfconfig.json, which CommandBox introduced, is now used by Lucee natively. And it can actually do even more than cfconfig can do, because cfconfig doesn't configure everything. So you can't just say, okay, I want to do server admin or web admin or whatever. But in the cfconfig JSON now, or in the configuration JSON for Lucee now, you can do everything because we are storing it now in that format. So when you define your configuration JSON, you can change everything with it. And as you see, when you upgrade from 5 to 6, your configuration will be configured or converted automatically for you. Good. Since we were working with cfconfig very many times, we wanted to use config import and config translate, which takes, for example, an existing Lucee XML. This is actually important for CommandBox because they can use these functions now to take the Lucee XML and convert it into a JSON configuration, which is helpful for everyone as well. So you can use these functions if you want to write your deployment scripts or your power-up scripts or your Docker startup scripts. So that is also very helpful. Yeah, we have to keep Brad happy. That is absolutely true. Good.
So one question with that,
Sure.
with the config import, that's a CF tag or a CF function, right?
A CF function, yes. It
so
is a Lucee function.
If we're doing like a warm-up script in Docker or something like that, we'd have to either run that command line or we'd have to load the server, execute that like that web page or whatever, and then let it import everything.
Well, yes. But what you could do is you could do that in your local environment, and then just create that, take your XML, convert it into a JSON format, and then use that later on, or just deploy that JSON that you have there, right? So you don't, these are just helper functions to make the switch easier for you.
Okay.
Good. This is something we promised for Rilo 1.0 or 1.1, and here it is in Lucee 6. Defining a proxy has always been problematic because you have to do that in every tag call. And with Lucee, you can actually do that with this.tag.mail.proxy and mail.server and mail.port and mail.username, etc., etc. But now you can define a global proxy, which will be used for all connections that leave Lucee, leave the environment, your network, right? And this is something that I was hoping that we can get in sooner, and apparently it wasn't even that hard, but it took us a while because, you know, as usual, it's there are other things that are more important. So you deal with those first, and we finally found the time to do this. Okay, so we have made a lot of changes to extensions. We try to move out of Lucee as many things as possible so that Lucee's core is smaller, and I think the current size, if you go to Lucee, lucee.org, let me just see if I can pull that up right now. Just want to see. Yes, so I'm moving that over now so that you can see that. If I go over here, you see here in the release, you have a Lucee Lite.jar, right? Let me just or Lucee 0.jar, which has no extensions whatsoever. I'm just going to download these two just to show you how big they are. Control A, I suppose. So, downloads over here. Show all downloads. Look what I just downloaded before, called Fusion 2023 deleted. I mean, I deleted the download, but anyway. So 24 meg is the Lucee Lite, and the Lucee 0 is 21 meg, right? So this is, you can actually run very much with the Lucee Lite. So if you don't need Hibernate or other things, then or any other extensions, then obviously you can go with the Lucee Lite, which makes your Docker container even smaller. For those who use Hibernate, we have upgraded from 3.5 to 5.4, and I hope that soon Ortus will take over support for ORM, because they are heavily building up on ORM, and we are really not very thankful users of ORM. I haven't used it once in the last 20 years. So whoever wants to use that, so we're now on Hibernate 5.4, and soon, hopefully, Ortus will take that over.
So I'm one of those fancy ORM users. It sounds like that Ortus is officially taken over as of 6. Is that still correct, or that?
Well, we talked about this at CF Camp. You know, they are having a way better, a way higher investment. Let me just change this, because you're absolutely right, Jordan. There was an error in it. We talked at CF Camp, and they said they would be willing to take it over. So it is just needs to happen. That's all, right? So we just need to make that transition. So we said, let's wait until Lucee 6 is out, and should happen any day. And then we will talk about this next, because, you know, this is always taking us a lot of time, because, you know, having to put your mind into something that you don't use a lot is obviously taking a lot of effort. And I'm pretty sure that Ortus is going to do a better job than we ever did. You know, for us, it was always, I have to be very self-criticizing there. It always took us a very long time to upgrade to, or to get to errors that are in Hibernate. So I'm very happy if Ortus takes that over.
Yeah, I've been using their extension for that for about 3 or 4 months now, and found it nice. There's been some bugs that have been in the Hibernate that you've provided for a while that have just been broken, that are now fixed. Things like logging and that type of stuff, and that's been great.
Hang on, do they have an extension themselves?
Oh yeah, they've had their extension for 4 or 5 months now, I think.
Okay, well, maybe we'll then officially exchange our Hibernate extension with theirs. You know, that could be happening soon, right? Because then we'll just say, okay, the official one will be there, supported by them. You know, yeah, go ahead.
And I think, and I believe that you actually aren't, in the latest builds, you're actually not including your Hibernate version at all. You have to manually install it now.
Could be. Yeah, could be. You know, I'm not a big fan of ORM. I used ORM a lot in the past, and even if it's Hibernate or whatever Hibernate, I used Hibernate a lot, but I still don't like it. I'm sorry, nobody can convince me of anything else. Doesn't matter. You can say whatever you want. You can give me your book, John. I don't care. Anyway, yes, and one thing that we have also changed is the scheduled task. Scheduled task execution. There. I got an error there as well. This is not my. These are not my slides.
Okay.
Tasks are, first of all, a new event-driven task engine. Well, please excuse that error right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tax. Right. Yeah. Well, let me just get that out of the way. And are. Tasks. Well, that makes no sense to me. Also, let's put it this way: introduced New. Okay, well, there, that makes sense. Good. So I think there will be a couple of blogs about this, about the task manager, because we are using it in a different way. So the task itself is a component, and the component says how often do I need to run, when do I need to run. It's just like an event gateway, which runs all the time. And it has warm-up time, cool-down time, and things like that. So there will be a separate blog about this, or even a presentation, because this would take maybe, I don't know, half an hour just to talk alone about that. Okay, then image, we have additional support. One thing that I like about ColdFusion's 2024 release that they're planning is they want to use some AI features to detect what images contain, or something like OCR as well, or where you can do image tagging. And that, I think, can be something where we can tie into as well. Don't get me started about AI. I think AI is great. It's really great, helping me a lot with coding. But it also sometimes, in my opinion, makes us lazy, because very often people just go to ChatGPT, take something, copy and paste it in, and then never think about it. Others might need to maintain that code. So in my opinion, ChatGPT should just do something like, okay, I put an error in there. You have to fix it before the code actually runs. Well, no, it wouldn't. It would hurt the success of it. But I try to use ChatGPT when I need to do some prose or things like that. But with coding, it helps me with certain things. For example, where I use it a lot is writing tests. Right? So when you write tests, that is something where I use ChatGPT a lot. Anyway, let's see how that goes in this soon. We're heavy users of Redis cache. So Redis cache is our favorite cache currently, our cache of choice. And we allow native Redis commands now in the extension that we have there. And also with the S3 file system, we're now using native libraries, native AWS libraries that we implemented and introduced. So no need for the Jedis library that we used before, which as written is buggy and restrictive. And the core libraries give us way more performance, or way better performance. And we allow different providers as well. New extension, WebSocket. I use that already, but it is not yet official. Good. This There Is More is kind of a reference to Lewis, but when was it? 15 years ago in Munich, he was doing a presentation about ColdBox. He just introduced ColdBox back then, and on every slide it has, and there is more. Right? So this was kind of a reference to that. Lucee now is calculating a little more precise. You know that very often when you just add two numbers, sometimes it doesn't really give you what you're expecting, or when you divide something by something else, because Java has an inbuilt precision, and this precision can sometimes lead to, I'm just making this up, 6 plus 4 is not 10, but it's 9.999999, whatever. If you round it, it's 10. But so we have all came across that. And so what we have done, since we were just using double as our precision in the past, Lucee 6 now uses big decimal, right? And you don't need to use the precision evaluate method anymore, or function anymore, if you wanted to have an absolute perfect calculation. It of course requires a little more RAM, but it is way better for the whole calculations. We tested the performance decrease. It's neglectable, really. Connection pooling, we're trying to reuse our database connections, and that has been improved a lot by using these Apache Commons pool, and it also gives us way more control over, like, for example, use it 10 times or use it 5 minutes and then recycle it and things like that. So these are all things that we have added to to the tags. You can check all the details in the Lucee 6 documentation. And as said, since we removed things like Axis 1, so there is no Axis 1 support anymore with WSDL, and certain things that we have removed and added as an extension. As I showed you before, we now have about 21 megs in size and 24 megs in size, depending on which one you want to introduce or use. Yeah, and we're now using loads of the built-in JVM stuff from XML parsing because they are good enough, so we don't have to use specific libraries. And okay, I think this one is duplicated about the connection pooling. Oh, and one last thing, as they always do. If you write a CFS file, .cfs, instead of CFM or CFC, you can write CFS. You can write your code completely in CFScript. So you don't have to start with CFScript and /CFScript. So if it ends with .cfs, then it will be immediately treated as a script file. Now you might say, okay, but I would like to use some tags in there as well. Well, let me just give you a quick example, just taking this sleep thing here and changing that. So I'm now in CFScript, and let's say I'm now doing something like loop from equals 1 to equals 10, index equals I, right? And now for whatever reason, I want to switch back to script, to tag. In Lucee, you can just triple tick. And now I can do something like CF output and something like this, right? Of course, makes no sense, right? And then a break. But sometimes when you have a script and so let's say a component which contains a view or parts of a view, then you can just write everything in script because I would tell everyone, please use script if you want to, or if you can, because it just produces way less noise and way less output. And if you want to switch back to tag for whatever reason, especially for those who never wanted to switch to script, I have in my former companies, excuse me, I had a few people that loved tags and they never wanted to go to script. And I told them, okay, why don't you want to go to script? Well, if I want to do a CF query, it's so much nicer. And if I want to do a CFML, and inside CFML, you need to use params, and it's very weird and awkward if you want to use it with, with the mail function. So introduce this triple tick, and that is very helpful in convincing a lot of the people that didn't want to switch to CFScript before. Good, good. So let's just try this and see whether it actually works. Just that you're not thinking that I'm making things up. Sleep, here we go. There you go, 1 to 10. Okay, any questions about that? Let's see.
Do you ever see the Adobe folks supporting those tag islands?
Until Monday morning, I would have said I don't care. And in fact, for the last 5 years, I didn't care because we didn't care at all about Adobe. We wanted to make sure that we're most compatible with Adobe as good as possible. But yesterday, I had a very interesting discussion with Xavi, and she and I, we talked about the future, what we can do. And so this can be one of the things, like I told her about the loop index item that we support with every kind of loop. So if you have a collection or an array or a query, not sure, but a file, loop file, you can always do index item, loop list, index item. Because with array, you have index and it contains the actual item. And with collection, you have item, but it contains the key. So, which is a little misleading. So that's why Lucee always supports index item. And for example, the way how I wrote here the tag. Where is it? So for example, this is something that ColdFusion does not support. They do something like CF loop and something like this and semicolon, I think, I'm not sure. I never use it like this. Right? So this is how ColdFusion does it, or similar to this. And Lucee just allows you to move from CF loop to removing all the angle brackets. That's it. Right, open a curly bracket. So I hope that they introduce it. And obviously, inside here, you can do again CF script, etc., and triple tick if you like. So it's nestable, right? So you can always do that. I use it every now and then, especially because I'm only coding with script, and if I'm writing if I'm generating output, it's much more convenient. So, for example, I have a perfect example for this. I'm using, I'm creating sometimes files, generating code. And generating code, you know, that is very, sometimes really a pain to use, I don't know, hashes and character 62 and character 60 and character 35 and whatever. So what I did there is I wrote everything in tag, and then I wrote the file in script, and whenever I needed to add a tag, then I just triple ticked in there. So it is very useful. So just give it a try and see whether it works. To me, it helps me a lot, especially in views or in emails when I have to put an email inside of CF script. It's much nicer to use the tag-based version of mail because mail automatically goes into output mode as soon as you are inside the mail tag. Same as query, right?
Yeah, I found a few tags. It's like that. So I've been using it all the time, but then when I use that, then the compatibility, I can't deliver that code to somebody who's running ACF at that point. So then I end up having to re-engineer everything. I love the innovation that you've done with the engine, but like I said, the keeping it up with the ACF users has been kind of a sore spot.
Well, that's exactly the thing that we try to achieve with it. And as I told you, I didn't care because it was important that I can use it with. And listen, there is also a business side of things because if we have users that are kind of using all the features that Lucee provides, it's a one-way street, right? So business only decision would be, of course, use as many things that you can use from Lucee, because then you won't switch over to Adobe CF, right? So, but on the other hand, in the meantime, I'm totally okay with Adobe just picking up all the things that we have introduced, like the one thing, the very easy thing, if you have a dump on the site, please, when you hover with the mouse, just output where the line comes from, where the dump comes from. Very many times I was hunting down a dump and I had no idea where it came from. You just start outputting some kind of characters. Oh, is it before the dump or after the dump? Okay, then I need to go into details there. Okay, yes, so the compatibility will hopefully get a lot better between Adobe and Lucee. It's not between Lucee and Adobe because there I think we're very highly compatible, but it's the other way around. Okay. And again, HTTP does connection pooling, and also HTTP allows you cached within, right? I don't know if you know this thing that if you, for example, write a function, oh, by the way, let's try to use this. I hope it works. Let's do CFS and just do it this way. Loop, or hang on. Do I still have that here? No, it doesn't. Okay, loop from equals 1. I never used a CF script. This is a new thing to me. I mean, CFS files. From equals 1 to equals 10, and apparently you see the oh, it still says CFML. That's good, but it doesn't recognize it because the extension for CF code still needs to be updated. Index equals local. Right? Oh, that's one of the things that we will introduce as well. if you're in a code block, you can do something like local dot var whatever test equals 4, and then this local.test variable will only exist within that block. It's just like how Java does it and JavaScript does it, but Cold Fusion does not, or CFML does not yet. So let's say echo equals echo 5 and break. And let's see, does it work? CFS. It works. Thank God. Okay, so good. Where were we? Yes. So usually when you when you have a dump somewhere, what you do is you actually write some echo so that you can see where is the thing. But if you now do a dump of I, for example, here, and run this, and then you hover over this, then it tells you web root test sleep CFS :3. Right. That has been very, very helpful. Good. And HTTP connection proving, that's exactly my word. So if I'm in here and let's say I wanted to call a function output something with I, and then I have a function here, function output something, which required numeric value, and then I'll do something like return val squared 2, something like that. Okay, and now let's say we'll do something else. We'll do range of 1,5, so we get a number of 1,5, and then we just do something, output something, echo the result, and break. Okay. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show you here, ampersand now. Time and now. Okay, I hope this works. Good. Let's see. Okay, so and maybe just put a sleep in here as well. Sleep of, and then we do a flush. Apparently, we don't support flush. Yeah, well, it does something, but it doesn't give me the result. Now I need to wait for 100 seconds. But what I wanted to show you is that in this case, it always executes the function, right? But what you can do is you can do something like cached within equals 0.1. Cached within you can of course create it by create timestamp, but it actually contains a fraction of a day. So if I say 0.01, that's 100th of a day, which is 14.4 minutes, right? So if I let this code run, it will, let me just put the sleep not there, but I'll put it down here. And I'll just say 10, then we only have to have 10 seconds, and we do something like 1 to 3. So we will have at least 3 executions, and then we'll do something else. We'll do a timer, type equals outline, and label equals exec. Okay, then we know how long it takes. Okay, we don't actually need the time, that's not important. Okay, I hope the code, well, it ran into a test timeout, good. Okay, refresh. It should be around 10 seconds first time, or not even 10 seconds, let's see. Okay, so 10 seconds, good. And it also gives me the I, but that's wrong. I need to say B equals, and here I need to pass in B. Right? Okay, so I passed in all the numbers from 1 to 10. So the function already has been cached for everything between 1 and 10. So, and if I let this run now, it actually executes in 0 seconds and returns my value immediately. So how cached within works is it just checks what are the arguments that are coming in. So if you have a deterministic function, which always returns the same thing if you have the same input variables, then it will return immediately. So let's assume we're doing something like an HTTP call with certain params that will return immediately if you cache it like that. And now the HTTP tag allows caching as well. So you can cache that one. Okay, good. Any questions regarding that?
Is there an easy way to purge those caches if they're in there?
Yes, yes. There is a page pool clear that you can, or there's the usual function that you have, or tag that you have. I think it's called object cache. And then you can just purge it with that, and then you can just add at the end type equals HTTP, type equals function, type equals query, and then you can purge from there.
Okay.
Right. Struct listeners, actually, I have a limit of another 9 minutes because I have a meeting later on. So I have a hard stop there. So I'll just go through the last couple of slides that I have, and then I'm open for questions, and I'll answer as open as I can. Struct listeners are methods that you can add to a struct where, for example, if you're addressing a struct that is not existing, then this method will be called and you can react on that. Okay, well, actually, it was the last slide. Anyway, if you want to have the source code, just go to GitHub. The link is in here. And you can just play around with it, ask us any questions. And, well, for that, I say thank you. And, well, let me know if you have any questions. Doesn't matter regarding what. I hope that I can answer anything.
So one of the things that's happened, at least with the 5.4 releases, is there were some pretty severe breaking changes that were introduced in minor versions and even subversions between code.
Okay.
And,
did you flag them? Did you?
Yes.
Did people flag them? Okay.
Yes, good. Quite a few people did, and they said, well, it's for security, we're doing it anyway.
Right.
That's been kind of a pain, particularly for those of us who like to keep up. You know, I don't necessarily really read every release note between minor versions or even like subversions, assuming that they do that. But these were intentional breaking changes, and I don't know how we can get to a situation where I can trust that, you know, these things won't be major. Like I have to read every single release note, every single JIRA tag.
Well, what we could do, and maybe this is something that we can highlight in the downloads or somewhere. I don't know, or I don't know how we can do that. But we might come up with something that notifies you that there are breaking changes in there, right, and that you should read this and that. Right. I don't know yet how that can be done, like with the startup or download.
Yeah, and I understand breaking changes from like 6.0 to 6.1 or 6.1 to 6.2 or things like that. Like I can kind of expect some of those things, but we've had it between like 5.4.0.32 to 5.0.33 or something like that.
Okay. And well, that then is just a lack of organization, because I know that usually you should then go to 5.5 or something like that.
Correct.
Right? And so thank you for that heads up. We'll try to remember that and try to get that done better next time.
Yeah, there's been like two things, and I know it was Zackster is his name on so Zach Spicer.
Zach.
Yep. I know he's been the one kind of floating some of these things, and in particular was to clean up some CVEs, but like the XML parser was one of them, and also removing the Yep, and removing the extensions. That was the one that really hurt me. Was I just did auto updates on some of my servers, and all of a sudden it removed a bunch of extensions. And
right. Well, that is not good. Yes. Yeah. So, well, yes. Thank you very much for that. I'll pass it on to the corresponding folks. Good. Anything else?
I've got another one if nobody else has any other questions. Sure. So one of the other pain points that I've had, particularly again, I'm in a Docker environment quite a bit. The ability to import SSL certs. I absolutely love that you added that to the IDE or to the administrator, and then there is also a function as well. But I've found that I end up having to run arbitrary code on like a warm up or things like that to import certs all the time. Is there any easy way to include those so that like in a startup script, or to have them somewhere in the configuration so they're picked up and imported into the key store?
I have absolutely no idea. So I'm very blunt and honest there. Again, send me those 2 questions that you had that I wasn't able to answer, and I'll make sure that you get your answer.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I don't have a better answer than that. I know how it works more or less, but currently for Docker, I don't know how to make them permanent so that you don't have to run that code all the time. So let me make sure that I'll get you the right answer, and then I'll get back to you.
Okay, and I think, if that, like, a possible solution would be to include that into like the CF config that gets imported or things like that. I think some of those things would be ways to do it, but
yeah, sure, absolutely.
John or Randy, do you have any questions?
Chris?
Good presentation. Yeah. I got, it's got me scratching my head on some issues. I'm in the ACF camp, but, I've been playing around with like Lucee and just like, going back and forth. That's why I'm concerned about the compatibility. I like what you had to say about the listeners for the query. That's interesting, and the cache within.
Cool. Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I was mostly just kind of looking at options. We're pretty much tied into ACF at this point, but.
Okay, no, all good. Listen, I don't hate Adobe at all. I love those guys. Without them, we wouldn't be here. And we need a strong Adobe as well, because if they go away, we would go over a short or long period, we would go away. I don't think that the Lucee community by itself is strong enough to survive. People would then go, okay, we need to switch away from Lucee because not even Adobe supports it anymore. So to me, it's very important that Adobe thrives as well. Right, so.
Well, I like what you're doing very much, because outside the enterprise, when people create open source projects, the Adobe licensing doesn't feed to creating Cold Fusion projects. And without a rich side collection of open source projects, then companies look and they don't see the strength of CFML. So in my opinion, Lucee is key to Adobe's strength.
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally something that I totally support as well. And it's good that it's only one left, right? One open source left. I mean, then it would be good, of course, to have a little more competition so that we can get a little more innovation into the whole field. But I mean, one thing that we're living off as well is feedback from the community, right? And anything that the community can provide as, okay, it would be nice to have this, like Nick said before, okay, why don't we include the SSL certs as well into the config.json? Maybe it's possible. I just don't know.
I got one other question for you, Gert.
Sure.
If I'm coming from ACF and I'm going to Adobe, is there a tool that will say, hey, right here, your loop doesn't work well on Lucee, or this is inefficient, and I will change it for you?
Yes, it is. Well, it doesn't change it for you, but it will tell you where it breaks code. So what you can do is you can just create a mapping in Lucee called /, which points to /. That's all. And then you can compile that mapping. So it goes through all the CFM files and all the CFCs and checks whether they make sense, right? And then it will throw up all the errors, right? Of course, this doesn't is not valid for runtime errors. Runtime errors are a little different beast because there you're dealing with dynamic constructs, etc., etc. But by default, it's very easy to just check your compatibility syntax by creating that mapping and clicking the button compile in your administrator.
Thank you.
One thing that Adobe has, and I can't think of the name of it, I haven't used it for so long. If you're upgrading from one version to the other, it will scan your code. It will say this program on this line, and here's a short example of that converted. And I realize you're limited in resources at Lucee, but man, if you had that, it would make it a lot easier for companies to. I've had people say, "Well, I don't know that it takes so long," and you have something like that. You run it, you show it to your boss, and say, "I think we could do this in 2 days." They might switch.
Okay. Well, yes, good idea. Thank you for that. And I think we can. Because the thing that we have now is actually literally more or less that, but it's not a standalone application. And also, I think just this vulnerability scan that Adobe has should be something that we should include as well. There are lots of tools out there that can do the job, and we can just incorporate and use one of them, right? So thank you, Rick. Good idea. Okay, unfortunately, I'm
out there that you can just plug in what you're looking for and the result if it finds it, and you don't have to do any coding. I don't know.
Yeah, well, come on, we have to let you think a little bit as well. But you're right. Yes, make it as easy as possible. Okay, so thank you very much. I unfortunately need to run.